and thanks for joining me on MTA's In the Fast Lane podcast today. It's no secret that we live in turbulent times. Events in America, the Ukraine and the Middle East have the potential to change the world order as we know it permanently. The doomsday clock has moved closer to midnight as AI and the potential for global conflict threaten our existence. And at a time when climate change is more important than ever, interest in action appears to be on the decline. Back home, we faced an election at the end of the year with the country divided on many issues and thousands of Kiwis leaving for Australia. Who better to give us thoughts on all of this than our former Prime Minister, Sir John Key? Right, welcome Sir John. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. You're looking very fit and well, I must say.
Yeah, feeling dangerously so because I'm 65 in a few months' time, so I'm waiting for Winston's gold card and the pension. I don't know what I'll do with it. I'll have to spoil myself or buy something, I'm sure.
Well, and this wasn't scripted, but we were just talking before about your golf and your handicap and what you're playing off these days. And do you want to tell us a wee bit about that? I'm sure people watching will notice your Augusta National polo shirt.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I'm playing off 7 theoretically, but I don't know. It's a frustrating little game, Look, to be honest, I'm quite consistent. So I can easily, like all golfers, get bogeys and things, but I don't tend to get a lot of doubles or triples so much, and usually I'll birdie 1 or 2 holes around. So I've had some really good rounds, like everyone. I've had some pretty horrible ones, but I've been pretty consistent in the sort of higher single figures now for ages, actually, post-Parliament.
Here's a tough one for you first up.
Yep.
Who would win a round of golf, you or Donald Trump?
Well, actually, funnily enough, I played golf with 2 American guys I know last week. One of the guys I know really well and the other guy I don't really know, but I play golf with him. And he had played golf with Donald Trump about a month earlier. And he said, because, you read all these things that says, Trump cheats and he's this and he's that. And he said he was remarkably good. He said he hits his drive about 210 yards. Not bad for a guy that's 79. Kind of a weird swing. Goes all around his body as swing. I don't know if you've actually
bit of an Arnold Palmer.
But he said, yeah, it's odd actually. But he's a big man actually, Donald Trump. And so that helps in golf and tennis, as we know. And I think he apparently chips and putts really well. So, I mean, in theory, I think he tries to argue his handicap's 3. So the argument is he would win. But don't know. Haven't tested it. I had to get asked, actually. Haven't taken up the offer yet, but I might at some point. You never know.
Have you ever read Rick Riley's book, Commander in Cheat?
I've seen it and I've read a few excerpts of it online, but I haven't actually read it. But
it's a good read. It's funny. Apparently, he was Trump's favourite sports writer until he read the book, and after that, he blanked him. Won't have anything to do with him now.
No. Well, that'd be the end of him. Anyway, there you go.
But no, good read if you find a copy. I recommend it.
Yeah. Okay, I'll read.
So aside from golf, what have you been up to since leaving office? Can you give us a quick life update, a sort of water cooler summary?
Yeah. Well, I work. I sort of work commercially, but I try not to work so that every single day is full and it feels like, the old days with a different location. So I'm on the board of 4 different companies. I chair 3 of the 4. Only one of them's listed, Palo Alto Networks. So we're the largest cybersecurity company in the world. I've been an advisor to lots of different companies at different times, mainly about China. So, Comcast and BP and BHP and, big companies that have a big interest there. So it's a sort of a bit of a mix of things. I was, of course, chairman of ANZ and on the group board and nearly became chairman of the group. But banking is tough. It's not so much that the industry's tough. I mean, obviously, I come out of banking and I've got a pretty reasonable knowledge. But it's just, there's a highly regulated board papers could be anything up to sort of 3,000 pages. It's 3-day board meetings. It's, between the group and the subsidiary, it's 19 board meetings a year or something crazy. It's just too much stuff. So my wife kind of said, this feels like a change of location, not a change of lifestyle. So I've really gone back to, 3 of the 4 are pre-IPO and one's in, public. So I reckon I work about 3 or 4 months of the year, and it won't be perfect. As we were saying off here, I had a board call at 4 a.m. this morning, and I've got it tomorrow morning, but then it all finishes by, tomorrow's is 9 in the morning and today's was midday, and it saved me flying all the way to New York, so that was great. And so I could be highly productive. I can have a board call that might last a couple of hours because everything I do pretty much is Silicon Valley, so it might be, 6 in the morning till 8, and then honestly I could be free. So go and play golf. We travel quite a lot. I'm around the house a lot more. So, Brona's constantly sending me out to find little jobs to do,
They're good like that. And did I also read that you're now a helicopter pilot? Is that correct?
Yeah. You're saying it with the same skepticism that my wife does, Simon. So, I realise this is a motoring podcast and not so much above the ground. But I had always liked the idea of them. I always had been in them a lot, and I was fascinated by it. I was fascinated by flight, I think, actually. Even when I was Prime Minister, it was one of those things where I'd be on a plane every day, and it wasn't a hard part of the job. I'd look out the window, and of course, sometimes when you're stuck at an airport or whatever, all that sort of stuff. It would have been far more useful if the New Zealand public had bought me a little Gulfstream jet or something. But anyway, they were reluctant to do that. But so I liked flight, and so I decided to learn. And initially, I learned actually in a Bell 206, if you know anything about helicopters. Then I learned, and then I finally finished my course and owned a Cabri, which is a French helicopter.
Right.
And it's a bit of a precursor to Airbus's offering, the Eurocopters. And I was going to stay in the Cabri for quite a long time, but it's a 2-person helicopter. It's a bit limited in what you can do. It was a beautiful machine. I actually sold it to a guy who is in Nashville. That's the international world we live in. It came from France, came in the container out here, ended up going in the container to Nashville. Ironically, they dropped it when it came off the port in New York, so it needed to be repaired. Anyway, it's all fine. And I bought, in partnership with a fantastic family, share of an EC-130. So it's a 7-person turbine helicopter. And I'm at about 300 hours now. So I've done quite a lot of hours, but I'm pretty conservative. I mean, those big machines, the insurers won't touch you until you've done at least 100 hours in that machine. Right. And because I have our son and lots of other people in it, I basically take a safety pilot with me, and they just fly around the country and seem to have a nice time. Don't have to do anything, but 1 in a million if something went wrong, and they'd be there to hopefully save our bacon.
Have you had any close shaves?
Not really. I mean, what you get a little bit is we have what's called TCAS, which is a anti-collision device in the machine, so we can see where traffic is. And in theory, every helicopter or plane has a transponder, right. And so it's just pinging a signal where you are. But believe it or not, some people, it's not the law. If I'd known this, I would have changed it as Prime Minister, but it's not the law to have a transponder on, actually, not for all aircraft. So I have occasionally been around when a biplane's been around, and there's been a drone once, and we had a flock of birds at 1,500 feet. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff going on up there, so you got to keep your wits about it. But I've never had anything where you would say it felt serious or so close it was dangerous. We do practice what effectively turn the engine off, auto rotations a lot, and I don't know. I feel incredibly safe in the machine, and the stats would sort of back that up. I think in 2019, I'm a little bit out of date on years, but in 2019, I think the type of helicopter I fly, the EC-130, flew 3 million hours worldwide and never had an engine out. So they are incredibly reliable. Yeah. Incredibly reliable.
Now, you're right. Being an MTA podcast, we do tend to talk more about vehicles on the ground than above it. So maybe if you could just sort of give us an idea of your favourite cars and what you're driving now. I understand you've had a bit of a recent change from one.
It's changed, actually. Well, again, I'm sort of, I suppose at one level I would almost probably describe myself as not really a car guy, in that I couldn't fix one to save myself. Although I suspect with modern technology, whenever I've bought a new car, and I've got to tell you, I've bought quite a few since I left office, they always sort of loosely want to take me to the bonnet, and I kind of try and point out that's a bit of a waste of time. Put a lot of technology in there now anyway, so I don't worry. But in that, I'm not one of these guys that has 20 cars in a garage somewhere. But I love beautiful cars, and I can really admire them for what they are. And so, I have lots of friends that'll have, quite extensive car collections, and I'll go and admire them. And if you put a gun to my head and said, I'll go and pick one and take it for a drive, be a Ferrari, I think. And I'm not trying to be too fussy about which sort it was either, but they all look pretty good to me.
Yeah.
But I've had Bentleys actually since I left Parliament. I've had two GTs and two Bentegas. And I just sold the Bentayga and bought a Range Rover, actually. I bought the autobiography. And the last Bentayga was, weirdly for me, because I've changed them in about 18 months, was getting near 3 years old, so it was going to come out of warranty. And because Bentley haven't changed and facelifted that car yet, it's going to next year or maybe the end of this year. I thought, I'm just buying exactly the same car, and with exchange rates quite a lot more expensive. So I thought, what the hell, I'll try the Range Rover. And I've got to say, to the Range Rover or Land Rover drivers out there, my son's got a Defender. I can't speak highly enough of them. It's a fantastic car, and it's served me well so far. So it's called Rowan the Range Rover.
Right.
Not a bad little machine.
Have you always named your cars? Are you one of those?
Yeah, they've always had names, right. And it's really my wife that names them. The helicopter's called Rover. Everything's got a name around here, other than me, I think. Actually. But yeah, the helicopter's got a name. The car's got a name.
Have you weren't tempted to go down the EV route? Have you ever sort of looked at that?
Don't mind them, actually. I know they've actually weirdly probably been massively in favour and come out of favour. I think they drive incredibly well. I've driven them a lot in the States, actually, because I don't know if you know this, but when you go to a lot of these quite swanky hotels now, they seem to have this sort of system where they'll give you a car, like it's amazing, So they're often Lucids or, Lucids don't seem to be their car of choice at the moment. They've had Polestars and different things, but a lot of them are EVs. And you just go in there and you sign up. And I always stay at the Rosewood, so I know them pretty well, in terms of Silicon Valley and things. And they just toss me the keys, and I don't think they're too bothered about when I bring it back. And it's a different style of driving, as you will know better than anyone, but you don't need to use your brake really, because it does it all for you. And the acceleration's crew. Honestly, one of the reasons I haven't actually bought one is I thought I'm just going to get so many speeding tickets. I'm going to be like all the other people I used to see when we were vetting people for their royal honours.
Yeah.
You'd see people with a long list of speeding fines. I thought, I'm just going to end up in that case because they're so quick. But I liked them, and I wouldn't have minded getting a Range Rover hybrid actually. But a lot of my friends will say, hybrids, you're kind of the worst of all worlds. They're not quite electric, they're not quite diesel. So I don't know. I certainly wouldn't be opposed to having an electric car, that's for sure. I like them.
Just on things like speeding tickets and the like, have you ever been pulled over in New Zealand by a police officer and he's recognised you or seen the name, and have you had a sort of funny reaction in that type of situation?
Well, weirdly, not because of anything I've done, not because I'm a goody two-shoes. I can assure you, I've had a few speeding tickets, but they've all been schoolboy errors going through speed cameras, I think, and nothing very high actually. Just 10Ks over or something, and I'm nothing to be proud of, but nothing amazing. But twice I've actually been in the car when it's been pulled over, and both times Max has been driving. And the first time I was Prime Minister and he was learning to drive. He was on his restricted license. So he was driving, and the police chase car was behind us, and the police officer pulled us over. And he walked in and he said, "Right, young man, how old are you?" or something. I think he said he was 16 or whatever he was. And he said, "And you're on your restricted license?" He said, "Yes." And he said, "Got your license?" He said, "Yes." And he looked at, and then the police officer looked down and he looked over and he went, "Oh, good afternoon, sir. How are you?" I said, "I'm very well, thank you." And then he went through all the things. He was very proper about what he did. And so away you go. And then the other day, actually Christmas Day, our son doesn't drink actually. And he was having Christmas Day hosted with his fiancée at their place. So I said, "Well, why don't you come pick me up? Then I can have a drink and I don't have to worry about Uber or something." So he came and picked us up, and he got a breathalyzer test actually just down the road from his house and during the day. But of course he doesn't drink, so that was no issue anyway. And I'm pretty fastidious. I would never drink and drive for obvious reasons. So I'm very, very, even if I was well under the limit, I wouldn't do that. So I've been pulled over twice, and they both recognised me both times, but nothing. Not that I was driving.
I have obviously nowhere near your level of profile or recognition or whatever from TVNZ days, but
Yeah.
Whenever I used to get pulled over, or several times when I got pulled over, and again, I must stress, for checkpoints and things like that, where I was very much under the limit. I'm with you on that. I would never drink and drive, and never have. And it would always be, the comment would always be something along the lines of, "Oh, you better be under, Simon, or we'll see this on the 6 o'clock news, and you'll be doing a story about yourself." And
exactly.
So there was always a comment, but it never caused any problems.
Yeah, it's amazing. You see them with the sort of, I guess there's a better name for this, but the booze bus type of thing. And they're often at like 10 o'clock on a sort of Tuesday morning. And I think, I think if you're over the limit then you've probably got a problem. Well, it's pretty weird. I mean, having said all that, I have this sort of slightly weird thing. It's not completely true. So someone will be able to take a picture one day and prove me wrong. But I hardly ever drink during the day. I actually like drinking. I drink wine, I drink beer, and I drink stuff. And I like having a glass of wine with dinner or whatever it might be. But when I was a trader and running banking businesses and stuff, I mean, the days of big drinking, boozy lunches, they kind of went out the window, and it was all, you could never do that. And of course, when I was in Parliament, and particularly with your Prime Minister, I mean, that's a non-starter. I mean, you're constantly on. And I'd never drink before I speak, because I always used to think I'm quite capable of getting myself in trouble with my rather interesting sense of humour, let alone be drinking. So I thought that would be the worst thing I could do. So, I hardly, honestly, even if we're in Hawaii, 99% of the time, if we were on holiday, it wouldn't make any difference. We'd be on foot, but I'd, because look, plenty of restaurants and bars down the road from us, but I'd probably just have a Diet Coke. But in the evening, I'd drink. Yeah, I like drinking, but I'd during the day, not my thing.
Yep, no, fair enough. Now, that little mention of TVNZ just prompts me to say that we in our previous lives, you as PM and me as a reporter, our paths crossed a couple of times, not too often, but a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I think the last time that we had anything to do with each other in that sort of, in those roles, was a story I did about New Zealand's sexiest politicians.
Oh,
and I hate to reopen an old wound, but you only came second.
Oh, that's right.
Have you recovered?
Who won? Yeah, well, who won it?
Well, Simon Bridges.
Oh, that's right. Well, he was a much younger man, wasn't he? You know,
that's pretty much what you said.
As long as it wasn't Stephen Joyce. I mean, I wouldn't want Stephen Joyce.
Stephen Joyce, he wouldn't have a chance.
Joyce, I mean, the former Minister of Transport. You can't have that guy winning it.
No. I should point out this is still available to see on YouTube, by the way.
Yes,
so,
I'm sure.
Yeah,
okay, there you go.
Simon Bridges took out first place, and you said almost what you just said. Then you said he's a good-looking young man.
Yeah, he is. Well, a good-looking young man. There you go,
Bill English was third.
Yeah, I know. Well, it just shows you they don't know many politicians, isn't it, really? I think that's sort of the main thing. I used to win, I will say, not to wishing to brag, but I used to win the who would you most trust to babysit your kids? Okay. And actually, weirdly, my guys really liked that. They used to say, that's a really good sign. See, if mum and dad trust you to look after their children while they're going off for dinner and having a lovely time, they must think you're okay, and they'll probably trust you running the country. And that turned out I won 3 elections, so I guess that was true.
Worked all right.
Who knows?
A little bit like that whole thing about, I don't know if this was anecdotal, whether it actually did happen, but there was always that sort of school of thought that you were the guy to have a beer with at a barbecue, not a glass of wine type guy. I don't know if that came out of focus groups or whatever, but that was always sort of bandied around. It's a similar sort of thing, isn't it? Just sort of gave you a bit of a common man touch, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's one of the reasons why I think Boris Johnson actually is a good politician, and he's very retail, Boris. And I mean, look, you could wander down any street in the UK and find a gazillion people that will tell you he was terrible and terrible Prime Minister and all that sort of stuff. And funny enough, I just actually recorded on TV1 the other day. They did something on the Boris Johnson years or something, and I was watching it again. Not to say he's a saint. I'm not really trying to argue that. I actually personally like Boris, but the reason Boris is dangerous, I think, as a politician is he's the kind of guy that if you were in a marginal Conservative seat, you'd want to take him to your electorate because the Labour voters in the local pub would like Boris. And they kind of forgave him for looking like he'd slept on the porch outside and all the different things that went on, colourful nature of his life.
Yeah.
And so, I think if you have that kind of persona, like people are not scared of coming up to you and they kind of want to. And it's a funny thing because when you're in the public service, like effectively you are, when you're Prime Minister, they won't do anything other than call you prime minister. Even your caucus colleagues will call you prime minister.
Yeah.
And they're very formal about it. And I used to go after hours, so don't worry about it. And just wouldn't stop. But you walk down the street and people go, "Oh, Johnny, how's it going?" And it was really funny. All these people around me calling me prime minister. The public would be calling me Johnny, and it was quite amusing. But I always took it as a positive sign because that they thought they could relate to me.
Yeah.
And relatability is really important because what actually in politics is people don't know policies very well. It's actually not to say that they're not bright or interested, because actually I think the public's really intuitive and they have a really good radar. They can sense when something isn't quite right, or I wouldn't quite believe it, or I kind of want to whinge about it, but I actually in my heart of hearts understand there's a reason why you're doing all this stuff. But overall, they always say sausages and laws, you never want to know how they're made. And I think that's sort of true. They just don't want to spend too much. So in the end, they go, look, we'll vote you in, you do your job. When you stop doing your job, we'll throw you out. But in the interim, just get on with it and tell us the results. That's sort of a little bit how they operate, really.
Yeah, and I sort of want to come back to that subject of likeable leaders and what makes one a likeable leader a little bit later on if we've got time, because I think that's really interesting actually, and it's very pertinent with the current leaders of the parties we've got. But just before we leave quirky news coverage completely behind, I have to ask, do people still mention the three-way handshake from the World Cup? Do you still get that a lot?
Don't mention it. I must do about 10 a week. Probably a little less now. I went to a wedding the other day, and some of the young guys, who was obviously we now go as the kind of olds, if you like, it was the friends of the parents, as opposed to, and three of the young guys came up and they all want to do the three-way handshake and photograph. And I used to go on campus and I must have done it, 1,000 times. It was the funniest sensation when it happened, as I have vigorously tried to defend my honour to not much avail. I think the video footage, as I've said, clearly shows me shaking hands with Richie and Bernard Lapissé coming over the top.
Right.
Now, I did feel his hand there, and I thought, and amongst, we've won a Rugby World Cup, it's all going crazy, everything going on. I remember at the time thinking, this is sort of slightly odd, but then thinking, okay, and I wasn't quite sure what was going on. I was looking at Richie, and then, anyway, the rest is history, as they say. And initially, of course, the euphoria of winning the cup, it didn't get any coverage. But sadly, as you know, in the media, nothing goes unnoticed. And a day later, it was out there, and
So, I could say at this point that explaining is losing, but I actually agree with your version of events, because I hadn't looked back at the footage before this, so I can actually see the point you're making. So
yes.
I'm going to give you a tick on that one. I'll give you a pass on that. Well, and I don't want to reopen another old wound, but I'm just going to bring this up here. For those who are listening, not watching, I'm waving a national flag here. Does it still rankle that we couldn't get that over the line, the flag change?
Yeah. Funnily enough, actually, I just did an interview with a guy who is a specialist in vixologist, would be a big study of flags. And anyway, he was asking me about it, and I said, look, here's the issue, right? People don't like change. They just generally, people are averse to change. It's just the way it works. It's quite a good thing when you're prime minister and you're wanting to stay in your job for a while. They don't like change. And we always knew it was going to be a really tough sell. I mean, without getting into the politics of it, it was funnily enough Labor and the Greens policy to change flag. So I kind of thought, there'll be a chance that even though they won't like it, they'll get there. But of course, they decided, okay, well, if we lose the referendum, it'll hurt me. And so it became a political thing. And actually, the fact we got so close was remarkable. But take it all to one side. I didn't, weirdly, actually really care what was on the flag in some respects, if you like. I mean, I care, but my point being, that wasn't the driving motivation. What we'd really done is, by then I'd been there for quite a while, and I had the sense of that national pride was really growing, and we were starting to become much more overtly, parochial and patriotic, and it's not our nature. New Zealanders is a soft kind of, not boastful people, and so we tend to, not be quite, we're a little bit more reserved. But I thought, hey, this is great for New Zealand to have this sense of national identity. And in the end, it's the silver fern. I mean, you can argue everything like it's the silver fern.
Yep.
And I always used to say to people, if you're walking down the street in Croatia and you want to show people that you're a New Zealander, you'll either put on a T-shirt that's got a silver fern, or it's like the symbol for Augusta. It's internationally recognisable. And we should have had the black flag, silver fern, just like Canada has the flag with the maple. And of course, what Canada did in the end was what I should have done. They just changed the law. Because actually what people don't understand is you don't need a referendum. All you need is 61 votes to change the Anthems and Emblems Act or whatever it is. Right. Anyway, we didn't do that. And but I honestly reckon had I just done it, and I mean, people were worried about, it looked like ISIS and all this, but had I actually done it, I think A, you would see a lot more flags. B, it would get used a lot more. C, I think it would have had some of the desired effects that we talked about. And D, I think most of the people that would have objected, some of them would still be objecting, but Canada used to have a flag that looked very much like ours. Show me a single Canadian that would go back. So,
and the interesting thing
was kind of my mistake, really.
But when Canada did, I don't want to sort of labour the point on the flag too much, but picking up on that last point, but when they actually made the change, most Canadians didn't support the maple leaf. There was actually quite a lot of opposition to it. But over time, it's grown. You'd probably be hard-pressed to find a Canadian that doesn't like that design now. So you're right. If the change had just been made, there would have been a lot of people saying, it looks like a bloody tea towel or a logo or whatever, but over time, everybody would have embraced it. I agree with you 100%. 100%. Wouldn't it have been? No. Wasn't there some copyright issue with the rugby union though?
Oh, but they would never have stopped us. I mean, the All Blacks were never going to stop us, and we wouldn't have necessarily had to have that film. We could have had something slightly more stylised. But I mean, look, here's the clue. There's a reason why Air New Zealand puts a silver fern all over its plane. I mean, it doesn't have the New Zealand flag on it because most people wouldn't recognise it. And as I said, it was really about I was all about trying to build confidence. I mean, it's a political view, and this isn't a political podcast, so I won't drown you with all the party, political broadcasts. But my fundamental view of life comes from my mother, and she was this Austrian Jewish refugee who got out of Nazi Germany just before the Germans invaded. And she was 16, and she had a very interesting life. But she always said to me, look, John, you get out of life what you put into it. It's as simple as that. And you can make excuses and you can find reasons why things don't work and find reasons why people are in better shape than you. But in the end, you make your own luck. Now, again, not to say that some people don't have a lot of tough luck. I kind of get all that. But broadly, I think she's right. I think if you work hard and you give it a go, and success gets defined in many ways. It's not necessarily financial success or being Prime Minister or being an All Black or whatever it is. It's in many ways. It might be being great in the community, being a great family person, whatever. There's a million ways. And so to me, anyway, I was all about philosophically saying, right, governments can only get you so far. They can take care of some things that you individually can't cover. Most people can't afford their own little army, so we need the police force. Most people aren't going to build their own roads to go on or fly a helicopter, so guess what? We need those. You can go through them all, but the long and short of it is outside of that, you make your own luck. And we're a little country at the bottom of the world. No one knows us for a living. We've got to find our way in the world. How do we do that? Well, we market the hell out of brand New Zealand. Yeah. And the flags just, should personify that. I don't think it does, but I think it should do.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, good point. I think in hindsight, the public probably got that one wrong. A change would have, by now it would be better.
I should have just done it. I should have just done it. Well, I let it get political. That was the problem. And that was the one bit that we read wrong. Yeah. To be fair, we thought, Labor and the Greens would fall into line. And I don't blame Labor and the Greens. It's called politics. They thought, if I lost the referendum, it would hurt me. The weird thing was we lost the referendum, and the next poll that came out, I was more popular. As preferred Prime Minister, I was more popular. And my numbers, the party's numbers went up. It was like, so people completely divorced it. They went, we don't agree with them on that. Some people, obviously, because they voted no. But then they went, oh, yeah, but that doesn't mean you can't run the country well or whatever. So it didn't have the desired effect anyway.
Talking about numbers and polls and whatnot, that's probably a perfect segue to get your thoughts on the current PM, first of all. I think a lot of MTA members and people listening will be interested in your thoughts and assessment of Christopher Luxon as we go into election year. How would you rate his performance as PM?
Well, I think he's doing some really sensible things, particularly in your space. I mean, some of the moves around speed limits and having realistic speed limits where the roads permit that, 110 k's and things, good on them. And they're building lots of roads, and we need roads. I mean, I don't care what people tell me, whether it's public transport, buses, trucks, whatever. We're a very spread out country topographically. It's difficult. Our topography, should I say, is difficult. So, basically we need roads, and the government's been committed to that. So, look, I think Chris is doing a good job. I think it's one of those things where it hasn't been the easiest run in the world, and I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One, he's managing a three-way coalition, which is with much more dominant partners. So he gets a little bit squeezed of airtime sometimes, and some of the things I know he would want to do, and he sometimes talks to me about wanting to do, he can't do because his coalition partners won't agree. And you've got that at the moment where Winston's saying, I'm not going to vote for an Indian FTA. Well, okay, but I mean, they happen to be the most populated country in the world. Europe's just signed a massive FTA. We get rich by selling things to other people in the world, and they're going to reduce their tariffs. Hello. I mean, I don't know, call me old-fashioned, but I think it's a great thing the government's done. So you get the drift, and that's just politics. I get it. Winston's got a base, and he's talking to that base. I mean, so I think we were always very lucky to have such big numbers. Our coalition partners were, bluntly, a lot easier to handle. So that's been one thing. I think, secondly, he inherited a pretty messy economic position, and it's been really tough. I mean, because you had such a bounce up in housing prices, and then something we've never really seen before, a significant fall in house prices in Auckland and Wellington. So, around the country, it's probably not so bad, but Auckland and Wellington feel that the mood has felt really bad, I think. Yeah. It's starting to come right. So, look, I think overall, Chris has done a really good job. He's hugely competent. I think he's one of those people. I mean, I see, I talk to him, a lot, and I see him at lots of different events where I'll go to things or whatever, and I always remark about how much time and energy he puts into everything, and he goes and talks to everybody, and he's incredibly patient. And I used to think I was pretty good at doing stuff, but I think he's really patient and hardworking when it comes to that stuff.
He does have great energy, to be fair. He does turn up, and he goes through a lot of things. He does seem to have a great energy about him. What do you make of that criticism that's quite sort of widespread, that his coalition partners kind of have the whip hand in the coalition, and that they've got too much, and they've got too much sway in the coalition over Luxon?
Well, they probably do, but the problem you've got is that it's really difficult because we have MMP, and he can stamp his feet all he likes and say, I mean, take the foreign buyers ban on housing. It's the craziest policy in the world, in my personal opinion. So, okay, Labor bring the thing in, and it was meant to stop, an increase in house prices for first-time buyers. Well, they went up more than we've ever seen in our lifetime. When Jacinda was Prime Minister, I mean, we're up 50% in 2 years, I think. So it never worked, right? But in getting rid of it, of course, it's been pretty impossible. And so, but what do you do? I mean, Labor's not going to vote for it. He doesn't have the numbers. He doesn't have an executive power. So sometimes his own coalition partners can make him look weak. And the reason they can make him look weak is because they're talking to their base. In the end, you're a government, but every party is talking to the people they think that support them. So it ain't easy. He's not naturally weak. I'll tell you that for nothing. I mean, I was on the board of Air New Zealand when Chris was the CEO. He's smart as hell, works really hard, was quite dominant in his views in the room, not afraid to make decisions, not afraid to hire and fire where he thought was appropriate. So I think I put it this way, I don't envy the governing relations he's got, not because of the parties. I think, to be fair, I mean, Winston and I have had our battles over the years, but I can respect the fact that he's had a political party that's been in and out of office, but been there for a very long time. And I think David's the same. He's doing a good job of running ACT. But they've got their own base, and what they're terrified of is typically MMPs consume small parties, and they try, as much as they're trying to hold the government together, they're also trying to mark out their territory.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that sort of strikes me, and tell me if you think I'm being unfair with this, is that Christopher Luxon has struggled to sort of win over people personally, even people that voted National. He just doesn't seem to have captured the affection of the country, perhaps as well as you did, to be honest. And there's a couple of things that I think turn people off, and one of them is his constant laying the blame for everything at Labor's feet. And I think there was probably a feeling in the first year of office, fair enough, but we're still doing it in the third term, and to me, it's worn quite thin, and a lot of other people say that. And then the other thing that I think he's probably not quite got right is his work with media and appearances. And he's obviously had a lot of training, and he's sort of developed some patterns which he repeats a lot. You know, the sort of caricature one is, what I have to say to you is, or what I'd like to say to you is. And I mean, first of all, is that fair? And secondly, is it a little bit of inexperience, perhaps, insofar as he hadn't been around the game for that long before becoming PM?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I'm obviously a big Chris supporter and a big National supporter, but, you know, no one can deny that his numbers and the party's numbers are not as high as we'd like them to be. Yeah. So we can argue all we like that we know him to be this fantastic guy who everyone should like, but actually that's not what the numbers show right at the moment. So, yeah, does he have a better job or another job to do to try and change that? I think yes. I think secondly, I think I probably did like the media more than him, actually. I think in hindsight, I think it doesn't mean that I didn't have my run-ins. I mean, my goodness, you know, sometimes he says to me, oh, it was a lot easier in my day, but I feel like saying, well, have you ever met Duncan Garner and Guy Nesper and Paddy, you know, Gower and a whole bunch of other people, and
Francesca Mould,
John Campbell. Yeah, there's a whole lot of them. Yeah, I remember, you know, and they were just doing their job, but it wasn't like they were patsies. I mean, these people were out there every day of the week trying to make stories and prosecute issues. So anyway, I don't know. I tell you what is sort of slightly weird, I think, and that is politics is a funny business, you know, and I think I am probably in hindsight, if I was to kind of analyse myself, I think I am a pretty retail sort of person. You know, I'm lucky to live in a financially very well-off position on a relative basis in New Zealand. But I think growing up in that state house, and I don't know, just the nature of the beast, and you know, I always get mocked because my pronunciation or whatever.
Yeah, but it's interesting.
Maybe that makes me a Kiwi. You know, I don't know.
This is something I'd actually like to ask you about, because you know, with respect, you had your share of goofs when you were PM. You know, you'd sort of sashay down the runway at the fashion thing, and you do your social media things, you know, with Max quite often. And but everybody seems to
apparently we killed planking, I think.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But everybody seemed to not just forgive you for it, but actually kind of like you for it.
Yeah.
But he just doesn't seem to have that. I don't know what it is. If he does something that's slightly embarrassing, everyone tends to sort of jump on and take the piss a wee bit. Whereas with you, it was almost embraced and certainly forgiven. But what's the difference? Is it just personality? I don't know.
Don't know. It's just different times. It's sort of weird because, like, I kind of probably at the height of being, you know, when I was really popular and our numbers were great, I could have walked the same plank that Don Brash did and literally probably fallen in the water, and everyone would have gone, oh, what's that clown doing now? But it would have all been fine. Probably my numbers wouldn't have changed. We got wet. But when Don did it, it was, you know, walk the plank, or he couldn't get out of a race car or whatever thing they wanted to criticise him for. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's horses for courses. There's just no getting away from the fact that, there isn't quite that thing. I think, without being silly, I think Labor did quite a good job, actually, of trying to position him as being this very unusual religious guy that maybe something dark and secret happens. In fact, I've probably been to church more than he has, and I don't go to church, but, I've been to plenty of weddings and funerals. So the point being, he actually, again, isn't some strange kind of guy. And But they did quite a good job of that. And I don't know, it's maybe there's just different times. It's sort of hard to explain. And it's like a lot of things. I mean, this is the weird thing about being prime minister. No one will ever believe this, but what's true is, okay, you can prepare yourself for lots of stuff. I mean, okay, if you're the prime minister of the day at the moment, then you just need to look at, Fox News or CNN for 2 minutes, and you're going to get questions on Greenland or Minnesota or whatever thing that, Donald Trump's done or the US government's done. But there are so many things you can't prepare for. And even when you get questions on issues that are coming, honestly, trust me when I tell you, you'll get the first couple right. And then there'll be all these questions. And I mean, we used to do it. I mean, we'd prepare for post-cabinet press. So it would take an hour. And I'd say to my guys, there'd be 15 of them in the room. I'd go, okay, ask me every rotten, dirty, nasty question you can ever think of, gloves off. And they'd get the first one right or the second one right. And there'd be all this stuff. And I'd be sitting there going, these people are the best in the business. They didn't even think of these questions. So why is that? I don't know. So in the end, you're a little bit naked up there. You've got to trust your instincts. And I think that was one thing I was quite relaxed in. I think most people kind of thought, look, okay, he's a sort of business guy. He's not a standard politician. He's probably not going to be there forever. As much as people say they were shocked when I retired, they probably weren't. And so in a lot of ways, when I did things in my natural disposition was to say, well, okay, I think this is good for the economy, therefore it'll be good for health and education or whatever because we'll have more money or whatever. I don't know that really sort of shocked them. And in many respects, I am economically conservative and definitely socially liberal. And actually, if you look at polls in New Zealand are broadly that. So 70% of the public, for instance, wanted euthanasia. Most of them will never use it, fortunately, but they wanted it. That's where I sit, So I kind of had that happy marriage of that kind of stuff. But all I can tell you is, despite what you might think, we don't rehearse for it. Like we wouldn't, weirdly, this might sound unusual, we wouldn't actually think up a policy, go and take it to a focus group and then do it. We would literally think up the policy, implement the policy, and then there would be focus groups later on. And you might sit there and go, well, that's pretty dumb. Why didn't you ask them? But the answer is because eventually we would say we need to do these things and we just need to, I need to be able to win selling the argument. And also that's the other thing is, you remember the number of times in the paper of the Prime Minister does U-turn, Prime Minister jumps off galloping horse, whatever, bucked off galloping horse. And of course, the TV journos like yourself will be out there saying, U-turn, Prime Minister does U-turn. But what does the public hear when they hear U-turn? They don't go, oh, he's getting his backside handed to him. They go, oh, good, he's listening to us. And and I wouldn't be doing a complete U-turn on absolutely everything. I mean, probably we were never going to go mining on Barrier Island. There's a shock. So it got pitched out there and then pretty quickly realised that wasn't right. But we did extend mining activity in New Zealand because we believed in it. So, I sort of see what I mean,
I totally see what you mean. And to be honest, and I don't want to rag on my old colleagues, but I actually think people talk about politicians being out of touch with the public and the electorate. I actually think the press gallery is totally out of touch with the electorate and the public most of the time. It's a very introspective world, the press gallery, and they become very consumed with issues and perceptions which are not reflected in the voting public whatsoever.
Process. They worry all about process, like when did I receive an email? How long did it take me to reply to it? Were there any other emails? Was there, and there's always some sort of, we always used to say, if it's cock up or conspiracy, go with cock up. Honestly, the number of times that people would think there was this great, fantastic conspiracy that me and Stephen Joyce and Bill English had dreamed up, and it would be like literally something happened and we kind of fell over ourselves, and good, bad, or indifferent, that was the way it was. Not to say that we didn't have a plan for a lot of things. Of course we did, but, we're never quite that clever to get everything right. And so I think what happens with the public is they go, okay, And let's just run this past me one time. I've got 3 children, a massive mortgage. I'm not sure if my employer's going to keep employing me. By the way, one of the kids is getting bullied at school, and I'm not sure whether grandma's hip operation's going that well. I'm sick of the traffic jam I'm in, and blah blah blah. And they're worried about the big issues, and as much as they care about politicians that say, "Hey, mate, could you sort some of those issues out?" And someone talking about whether I read an email or I'd ever met Kim.com, it's just not that interesting. It's not relevant in their world. They just go, okay. But to the press gallery, they're sick of hearing the stories about the economy or whatever, because they hear them every day in Parliament.
Yeah.
And so they just kind of get sick of it. And I think it's a bit of a shame in a way, because it's a little bit of a disservice to the public who actually kind of probably do want to understand things. But now, it's not always that way. Like if you go and have a look at the story, say, about the Indian FTA, you used the example earlier, I think the Juno's did a pretty good job of trying to say, hey, this is what it means to New Zealand, these are the jobs. So that's not always negative. But, well, it's just the nature of politics. It's a bit of a cat and mouse game.
It is, and always will be, no doubt. Which will only ramp up as we get closer to November the 7th. So what are you picking as the battleground issues for the election this year? Cost of living, obviously, is probably top of the list. But what are your thoughts on that and other issues that are going to dominate the campaign trail?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you look at the themes for just a second, what's happening in the world is the Economist wrote a story, let's take a step back a while ago, that said we're living in the era of grumpiness. And I reckon that grumpiness has manifested itself in political parties that have tapped into that feeling of, maybe globalization isn't working, or migrants, aren't playing fair and, don't pay their tax or haven't come legally or whatever. You can go through a million issues. And it doesn't matter where you look in the world, there are political parties that are tapping into that in quite a significant way. Pauline Hanson in Australia, Nigel Farage obviously in the UK, Trump clearly is in that vein in the United States. Winston's always played that space to a degree in New Zealand. And I think that grouping of people that feel, hey, I'm not well served by the traditional left and right. I think that continues actually. So I guess, of course, the economy, the future of where we're going, a little bit on, there'll be individual issues, maybe around tax, or there'll be, whether roading or public transport, it'll be the normal stuff. But I think more actually what you're going to see is, I wouldn't be surprised to see an election where I think National gets home. But would I be surprised to see New Zealand First and ACT poll pretty strongly? Not at all. Just equally, like I wouldn't be surprised to see certainly the Greens poll pretty well. And as for all the problems that Te Pāti Māori's had or having, again, there's a base for what they talk to and about. And I might not agree with it, but here's a clue: they're not trying to talk to me. They're not even interested in me. They know I'm not their voter. So I wouldn't be surprised if you do see, there's been a lot of times in New Zealand's history, National and Labour together have polled 80%, a few times when they've polled in the mid-60s. I wouldn't be surprised to see this as an election where they're in the mid-60s on a combined basis.
Yeah, interesting. I agree, actually. And I feel like the electorate has become quite polarised and more extreme in many ways. And some of that is around age, right? Because you've got your older voters who are very much concerned about their immediate future, and they're probably, the Winston National voter. But the youth voter is interested in, the young voter is interested in completely different matters. They're interested in treaty issues, diversity and welfare and sort of human rights type issues. Climate change is massive. So I almost feel like there's quite a gap, and maybe it's always existed, you would know far better than me, but I really feel that there's a huge gap between the sort of older voter and the younger voter this time. And I agree, I think that will play out by way of more of a levelling of the field. And all these polls writing off Te Pāti Māori and the Green Party, I just think they're way off. I think their voter, their base is stronger than that, and it will overcome hiccups.
Yeah, I take it all with a grain of salt. I mean, for a start off, don't forget, when you have a poll of even 1,000 people, and that's a lot, TV1 does say 1,000 people. Okay, but within that, for the Greens to get, say, 8% in that poll, 8 in the 1,000 have to be there. 80 in the 1,000 have to be there, and it doesn't take a lot for them to be sort of 60 or for them to be 90. It can move around quite a lot. So I guess my point is polling, I think, is really hard now, because in the old days you'd poll on landlines, and landlines weren't perfect, but if you ran the sort of postcode of Remuera, you're probably pretty certain you're going to come across a right-wing voter. And if you rang a postcode or telephone number for South Auckland, it's probably a pretty decent chance you're going to run into a Labor left-leaning voter. So of course, always strictly correct. I mean, but it's a proxy.
Yeah.
How do you do that off a mobile phone number? It's very difficult. And then people can say, "Well, I do it over the internet," but then that requires people to opt in, and it's just not that easy. So I'm not sure. And then to your point, young people are getting their information in very, very different ways. I mean, my son is highly educated, double degrees, runs 3 businesses. Last time he watched the 6 o'clock news was at our house. That's the only time he watches it. But never see it. Probably actually better up to date with a lot of issues than I am. But goodness knows where his feed's coming from. Honestly, it's everything from Reddit to whatever social media sites he's looking at.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. I've got a 25-year-old, and he would be the same. I think the last time he watched TV was probably because I was on it, and that's 10 years ago.
Totally.
So, but yeah, he knows far more about many things than I do. He's a very astute, voter, really. So yeah, I totally get it. They get their information from very different sources.
Well, even podcasts were in a thing a while ago. I mean, nowadays people listen to podcasts when they're in the car, or I don't know, on their laptop or on a train or whatever they're doing. I mean, there's lots of ways you can and consume that sort of thing, and they're popular, for lots of reasons. So, that people, look at someone like Joe Rogan. I mean, his podcast lasts for 3.5 hours and seems to have millions of followers. He's made a lot of money out of it, so it's working somewhere.
Absolutely. One thing you touched on before, and I'm interested in your thoughts on, is the house price situation in Auckland and Wellington. And it seems to me this is a bit of a sticky one for the government. This is a bit of a tricky one for National, because you've got a senior minister, Chris Bishop, who's on record as saying, the reason I get out of bed in the morning, the reason I went into politics is to have more affordable housing for more people, to move away from the cycle of house price growth so more people can get into homes, and this is my reason for being in politics. Yet, on the other hand, many traditional National voters want their house price to increase. They've put their money into property. That's their long-term retirement goal. That's their long-term investment, and would feel pretty piqued, I imagine, at any suggestion that we need to bring the price of your property down, which has happened anyway through market forces. But they would. It feels to me that National risks upsetting some of its voter base by persisting with this affordable housing line that Chris Bishop is clearly quite wedded to. How do they solve that conundrum?
Well, not easily. I mean, so what Chris Bishop is talking about is not unique. Chris isn't the only person who talks about this kind of stuff. I mean, there's quite a lot of international evidence that, and I saw a survey in the UK recently that said, weirdly, most cohorts are feeling better about life, and they believe in the equivalent of, say, the American dream, except for young people who often believe they'll never be able to afford to buy a house, and they're getting locked out of all these things, and the boomers got to enjoy everything and they wrecked the environment along the way, and we're left with this highly indebted nation's unaffordable house prices, intergenerational costs being lumped on us, and life isn't fair. Okay, so that's a consistent view, actually, that is in the political discourse, if you like. And, I understand what Chris is saying. I understand that sort of argument. On the other side of the coin, falling house prices are a nightmare. And they're a nightmare because if you think about the way housing works, at the moment, a third of people in New Zealand have a house with a mortgage, a third of people in New Zealand have a house no mortgage, and a third of people rent. And the people that rent, sometimes they rent because they're pre-purchasing a house. often they might rent because they're not necessarily going to live there forever, or maybe they've had a change in marital status. They got divorced and they don't want to buy a house straight away. I'm even sure they're going to go to Australia or, whatever. There's a million reasons. Can't afford it. They're flatting in Dunedin at university. There's a million reasons, right? So, but if you go to the third that have a mortgage or the people that want to buy a house, very often they will be borrowing a fair chunk from the bank, 80% LVR. So of the $1 million, say the house costs, 800,000 is being borrowed, 200,000 is their own. If they buy that house for $1 million and the house prices go down 20%, they have no equity in the house. They cannot sell. They cannot, if they have a relationship breakup, they're literally half the time are staying in the house. They might hate each other by that point, but they can't get out because there's no equity left. Or maybe then they actually owe the bank money.
And compounding that, they've seen their interest rate go up as well on their mortgage. Yep. So they're struggling to make their mortgage payments too.
Yeah. And then they've got this wealth effect where they sit there. I mean, it just doesn't matter how many times, you can argue the economics all you like, but if you own a house and you go and buy the house, I'll keep the math simple, you buy it for $1 million and, and you put in 200,000, borrow 800,000, over 10 years it doubles and it's worth $2 million and your mortgage is still 750, all of a sudden you feel wealthier. And when you feel wealthier, you go, well, I'm a millionaire. I've got $1.25 million down of equity, and you might borrow a little bit more and have a wee holiday and buy yourself something and do a few things. And that's the way life works, And so negative house prices are negative. And then the only other second point I'd make is that basically the argument at the moment from the government is that intensification is the answer. It's partly a local government thing as well, so it's not all our guys, but it's intensification is the answer. And my point to you would be, I get a little bit of that, but who wants to live there? I mean, I'm on record when I was Prime Minister saying, look, apartments are a good idea. They're great at various stages of your lifestyle. When you start, maybe when you're a bit older, whatever. But a hell of a lot of people live in New Zealand, I've got to tell you, because of the Kiwi dream, that they think they're going to get a bit of dirt in the backyard. Kids can run around, they can have a paddling pool, and they won't have a barbecue. Yeah. And they don't want to live in these high stories. So these apartments do not sell well in New Zealand. The aftermarket's been terrible. So yeah, you can argue all you like. You can put a 15-story building next to us in, St. Stephen's Ave, but I've got to tell you, I'm not entirely convinced who's buying all this stuff. Yeah. So I guess all I'm sort of saying to you is, look, the simple answer about affordability is a story of house prices, but it's actually a story of interest rates and wages. And if you could define what is utopia, in my opinion, it wouldn't be what Chris Bishop is saying, a 40% reduction in house prices. It would be slowly, gradually increasing house prices with wages running faster than house price growth and with modest interest rates. And frankly, I think that's actually a scenario where people have predictability. And we live in a property owning democracy. People want to own homes. New Zealand Super is predicated on you owning a home. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just stuck in the view of all of those national voters that you're talking about. But I, for one, we are not overloaded with property in our house. We own one house in New Zealand and we own one house in Hawaii. Now, my son has property interests and kids own houses. Yeah, I get all that. But basically the bottom line is, it's not like we own 50 rental properties or something and, I'm somehow pushing the barrel. I just think that for most people, if they can buy a house, it's a great way of saving. It's better for societal issues like, predictability of kids going to school and all that sort of stuff. And what you don't want those people to do is going into that house and then getting cleaned out because house prices go down. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just quickly on local politics before we talk about the global situation, I guess in the interest of fairness, what would your rating or your assessment be of Chris Hipkins and his chances going into the election? It always strikes to me that perhaps unfairly, Chris Hipkins, he just still comes across as quite boyish, it's an unfortunate...
Yeah, well, he looks like he's 12.
Exactly.
So does Simeon Brown, to be fair. Maybe it's a useful thing that'll serve them well when they're 55.
That's right, but it's unfortunate, isn't it, when somebody just sort of lacks a natural gravitas and sort of maturity and which he's obviously a very bright, capable guy, but, it's hard to get past that sort of image, isn't it?
Yeah. Look, It's going to be quite a tight election. I mean, I think everyone can tell you that. Um, obviously, this is not going to come shock to anybody listening to this podcast. I want National to get there. But is it going to be a hard-fought race? Is it possible there's a change of government? You cannot rule that out. And if our guys want to get home, they've got to get out and vote for us to get back. I don't live in a world where, I don't live in a world where I hate politicians because they come from the other side. Philosophically, obviously, I identify with the views of our people. But if I saw Chris Hipkins in the street, I wouldn't walk on the other side of the road not to talk to him, and I wouldn't abuse him. And I don't think the man's an evil guy. I think he's got a philosophically slightly different view on some things in life than me. But I quite like Chris. I've had some good chats to him over the years, and look, I think most people would accept that Jacinda was at the end of her time was quite a polarizing prime minister because of
Indeed.
COVID and all of those things. And I know lots of people who just really, really do not like her. And I always try and say, look, I know Jacinda pretty well. I don't dislike Jacinda as a person. I don't agree with the way that we ran the COVID policy at the end, and I don't agree with some of the things she did. And obviously, I don't love her government and all that sort of stuff. But at a purely personal level, I wish her well. I'd say life's too short to have all that sort of stuff, really. I mean, in any parliament, honestly, there's some that you like and some that you don't like, but it's a little bit less about what party they come from and a lot more about their personality, really.
Yeah, no, fair
Some
enough.
of them don't like me, so it's hard to
Who
like
could
them
not
anyway
like you?
because
Who could not like
mutual.
you?
Oh, well, trust me, some don't.
It would actually be fantastic to touch base with you later in the year as we get closer to
See whether I'm right.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah. But to revisit and sort of look at progress and how things are going on the campaign trail, if that opportunity presents itself, that would be fantastic. But it would also be great to talk about world politics now, because, man, what fascinating times we live in there. And perhaps first, if we talk about Donald Trump. And for me personally, I've gradually come to the belief that although his politics are certainly not my politics, he's an incredible individual. I mean, he's an absolute force of a man, really, But he does seem to be taking, well, first of all, I mean, would you agree with that in terms of sort of character assessment of Trump? I mean, it's very hard to think of somebody possessing the same self-confidence and belief as he does, really. He's quite a unique character.
Well, he's 79 years of age and he doesn't seem to be running out of energy, that's for sure. I mean, his work rate and things are sort of incredible. Look, policy-wise, some of them, some of them I think are right or at least broadly correct. I mean, countries do have a right to protect their borders and people do want to feel safe. And there are plenty of things where I'd say, I kind of agree with some of the things he's doing, or at least a decent share of it. Some of them I obviously disagree. I don't agree with tariff policy. I just don't think it's good for America, actually, let alone the rest of the world. And I think it's an interesting position because I think the US has, ever since World War II, really been the global leader of the free world.
Yep.
And it does seem as though he's much more focused on probably really, frankly, North America and the Americas as his backyard, and a little bit less about other parts of the world. So, there's sort of some interesting things. As you say, his personality is very, very different. If you look at polls, this is just a statement of fact. I think someone like President Obama was about 90% popular in New Zealand, and I think I haven't seen one, but I reckon if you looked at a poll, probably Donald Trump would be 90% negative. And a lot of it is just style more than the sort of issues. But what I've always tried to say to people, because I'm a natural right-wing voter, obviously, so I would vote for the right. What I've always tried to say to people is, well, okay, let's say you really don't like Donald Trump. Is Donald Trump the problem, or is he a symptom of the problem? I mean, because he gets there because the majority of voters who vote, not the majority of Americans, but the majority of voters who vote, voted for him. And they voted for him because they're angry and they don't think life is fair and they don't think that they've been treated fairly, and, they're kind of sick of things. And it's a little bit like, okay, take his position in Ukraine. is it messy, and is it like, would it be completely fair if the Ukrainians had to give up ground and things? No. But he is right. An awful lot of people are dying, and we've got to stop it somehow. So it's like I find with a lot of what he does, I can see a logic in not everything, but a fair bit of it. Sometimes he loses me on some things where I look at it and go, I just don't get that. But what it's more a reflection of is, it comes back to that thing I was saying to you earlier. There's a global trend, and this polarization and extreme views, I think partly driven out of COVID, partly driven out of social media. Man, it's alive, but it's really alive in America.
Yeah.
Really alive in America. And I spend a lot of time there, and honestly, I'm really surprised. I go there, and the number of people that come up to me and go, "Oh, Donald Trump, our president's doing a great job."
Yeah.
It's not something you hear in New Zealand, but honestly, you do hear that in the States a lot more than you would think, which I know our media and stuff wouldn't agree with, but it is remarkable.
Well, I think we could spend plenty of time on how the media have got Donald Trump wrong. I think they've just consistently underestimated him, but that's probably a subject for another conversation. I think the media coverage against him, which has been so loaded against him as well, is just. But yeah, I mean, he clearly struck a chord with the "Make America Great Again." I mean, this is your point about, is he the problem, or is he a symptom of the problem, or he tapped into a chord with that, into a vein with that, and clearly there was a lot of angry, dissatisfied voters for that message to resonate, right? Because if there wasn't, it wouldn't have worked. But it worked so effectively because there was a lot of people out there who did feel disillusioned, who did feel the US had probably been undermined on the world stage and lost its prestige. And, he has been hell-bent on absolutely reversing that. And yeah, say what you like, a lot of people love him for it. I guess the question is whether he has done that to such an extent that it is bad globally. I mean, America's always been seen as that force for good in the world, and that sort of stabilising influence, and the world order of the last 80 years has pretty much depended on that. And he just doesn't seem to care about that one iota. It's US first all the way.
That's right. And so he would say, oh, okay, well, I've piled the pressure onto Europe, and guess what? Finally, for once in their life, they've started spending more on defence and stop syndicating everything off and palming it off to me to look after and pay for, and I'm finally forcing them to pay some money. So that's fair enough. I sort of get that argument. On the other side of the coin, the concept that we would say to someone, well, if you don't play ball with me on Greenland, for instance, because there's a natural security position I'm trying to protect you, I'll whack a tariff on you. Seems pretty bizarre, doesn't it? So it's what's unusual is probably as much as anything, it's that point that you're just making, that we're so used to America being this kind of, it's a bit like dad, being a teenager and dad being the sensible, logical voice, or mum being the sensible, logical voice in the household, and all of a sudden, it feels different. We're so used to that, and it's changed. But I don't know. I wonder whether, as said to you, look what's happening right across the world. Le Pen in France, Farage. I mean, Farage is polling more than the Conservatives. At one point, I think he was polling more than the Conservatives and more than Labour. I mean, it's incredible, this sort of movement. So, and even Brexit, you sit there and you go, logically, if you were part of a big European trading bloc, would you break out of it? Well, they did. So there's something going on in the world, and I don't know. I actually think, if you, I always say to people, and this is hardly a shocking statement, I think if you close your eyes, cryogenically froze yourself and came back in 20 years, what would the world look like? And if you want my view, there'll be three superpowers: India, China, and the United States. Yeah. So you might have had 80 years where it's really been the US that's been the superpower, but it won't be like that for much longer. China is obvious, and India is rapidly growing.
Yeah, but is that good for world politics, though? I mean, inherently it doesn't feel like a very secure thought to have three massive superpowers dividing the world up. and fighting over it. It's not
Yeah.
a particularly reassuring long-term thought for me anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I suppose it depends on how it plays out. I mean, if, for instance, let's argue that China is a good actor, like, and it's not. And actually, history would say they haven't actually been overly aggressive. They have their own view of what is China. So they have a one China policy, and that includes Taiwan and Hong Kong and all those things. But they haven't actually, outside of that, been overtly aggressive. So what you do know is if China and India just carry on doing what they're doing, which is growing at these incredible rates, building a huge volume of middle income consumers. Given we live in Asia and they're part of Asia, I think that's actually good for New Zealand's economic future. And that's why I know so many people, for the last couple of years, I think we've sort of lost our mojo a wee bit and people have felt pretty down. And I think, again, it's largely been an Auckland, Wellington thing where, house prices have been bad, cost of living's been tough and interest rates were going up and the Reserve Bank engineered a recession. Who knew, but they got one. So it's been kind of hard for people. I think that it's so easy to feel negative, but then I just look at, and I don't want to be a Pollyanna about it, but I just look at New Zealand and say, okay, for all of that, what a remarkable country, still rich in resources, great place to grow things, fantastic place to visit, largely unpopulated. So we might think we've got issues, but you go around the world and every country's got those issues in spades. So, to me, at least anyway, I haven't lost faith in New Zealand. I think we go through our moments, but I still think it's a mighty fine place to live.
I think for me, the real, I actually could understand the logic behind it, but for me, a real alarm bell was around Trump and Greenland. His argument made sense to me from a world security, American security point of view, but just the way he went about it showed such a blatant disregard for NATO and another sovereign nation, and it was I just found that it was scarcely credible to see a US president talk in that way.
Well, firstly, I can understand it, intellectually, a piece of dirt and they want to protect it. I get that. But, then they've also got a lot of rights already, by the way, by the looks of things. Not that I'm the expert in these matters. But, so fair enough. But if you go and go into ChatGPT or Gemini or one of these AI, things, and say, summarize to me in 10 points the art of the deal, Donald Trump's book. What they come out and tell you pretty quickly is you need to gain leverage. So I need to get leverage. That's the first thing I need to do. I need to gain leverage, and then I need to negotiate the best position I can using the leverage I've got with you, right? And there's varying different things. There's a few other things that it comes out with about what you should do. So, he goes in there and he says, I'm going to invade you if you don't agree to it, or I'm going to put 200% tariffs on it or whatever. And then lo and behold, what he's actually agreed is, by the looks of things, I'm not sure we're completely right, but a little bit of extra dirt for a few more bases. Maybe that was the starting position. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't know.
But everyone's so grateful that he says, I'll accept that instead after making the big threat.
That's my point. Yeah. Then all of a sudden it looks all right, eh?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I wonder also too. I mean, you looked at the US polling was because I watch NBC and ABC News every night on YouTube. Really fascinating, actually. And the US polling on Greenland has been that the vast, overwhelming bulk of Americans do not support him going in there or do not support him spending any more money there. Actually, the vast bulk of Americans just want him to get on and fix the issues in America.
Yeah.
That's actually what they want. His strongest line was drain the swamp. That was actually his best line. Probably make America great again as a national rally cry, if you like. But
yeah, I think there's been a real reserve amongst the American people to get involved in overseas conflicts, going back probably to the 60s and 70s with Vietnam.
The Vietnam War, really, yeah.
Yeah.
And actually with pretty good reason. Their track record hasn't been great. It's nothing personal. It's just they're really hard wars to win, wherever you go. And it might even be like Venezuela. I mean, I don't think again, most people would probably say, if you were just being objective, were there a lot of drugs coming out of Venezuela? Yes. Is Maduro a bad actor? Probably yes. Blah, blah, blah. But, if they ended up having to actually run the country, man, that would consume a lot of bandwidth for Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth and a few other people, I would have thought.
Yeah. What did you make of Canadian PM Mark Carney's speech where he basically said sort of middle powers had to band together and, if we're not at the table, we're on the menu? What did you make of that?
Yeah, well, I know Mark quite well. Excuse me, he was Reserve Bank governor or governor of the Bank of England. And when I was Prime Minister, I used to go to the UK a lot and he would always see me. Really gracious guy, would always see me. Super bright. I liked him. I think he's quite a moderate, actually, really. He's just making a point, isn't he, that if you accept that we're living in this world where it almost feels like, certainly Donald Trump, I think, has had a view that sort of says, if you're the big dog, you kind of have some loose authority over your area. It's like, because you kind of do get the feeling he's far more sympathetic to what Russia's doing in Ukraine than we might feel about it.
Yeah.
And weirdly, despite all the things they say about it's a red line if China was to take over Taiwan, you sort of wonder whether that'll be the same position in 10 or 15 years if he was still there, arguably, right? Don't know, but not sure. So I think Carney's point is just simply, if you're Canada, and certainly it's true if you're New Zealand or Australia, you're never going to be a superpower. So it's not a new view, actually, that small countries can get a lot of strength by being together. That's why the kind of, these small powers have actually had a fair bit of influence. I mean, it's kind of interesting with Canada. That's the one part of the relationship with the United States that's really confused me. Could I understand there's election in Venezuela? Yeah. Can I understand? Because I think Trump actually genuinely does hate drugs and the scourge of drugs and the number of young people are dying from fentanyl and all these things. I actually give him some credit for, he's not being cynical about that. I think it worries him, troubles him. He wants to stop it. Good on him. I agree with it. But Canada's like us saying, oh, we're not going to have a great relationship with Australia. I mean, there have been the odd time the odd prime ministers haven't got on, but as a general rule, we work pretty hard to make it happen because it's logical,
Yeah, and I think
it's been a weird response.
I think Canadians are puzzled too, aren't they? I think they're almost hurt.
Yeah.
They've always sort of thought that I think they've always known they were the little brother, but I think they've always thought it was quite a respectful and, amiable sort of relationship between the two, and certainly a productive one in terms of trade. And I think they're just quite confused and hurt by some of the language that's come out.
That's the impression I get. It's so but I just find it slightly odd because I think, and the stuff that I know of Mark Carney, I would have thought if the US president was trying to have a good relationship, like a practical working relationship, I think he'd get one with Mark Carney. Like, Mark Carney's not Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn has an extremely socialist view of the world, or Bernie Sanders, Fair enough, it is what it is. They're entitled to their view. It's a hell of a long way from where I think the world should operate, but fair enough. It's life. If you can't defeat the argument, then, there's something wrong with you, right? But Mark Carney's not that person. Mark Carney's a moderate. Totally. Mark Carney could be on the right or the left, would be my guess. I mean, I never picked up he was particularly left-wing, for instance, when I spoke to him.
Talking about powers and countries banding together, I saw a story today reviving the suggestion that New Zealand should become a state of Australia. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Whether that would ever changed. We've always been in the Constitution of Australia. We just have to tick the box. Look, in the same way that Canada is not about to become the 51st state, we're not about to become whatever the 8th state of Australia or whatever it is. It won't happen. But what we have got is the best scenario. CER is the most comprehensive free trade agreement. We have I used to think, actually, when I first came back, we should have a single currency between Australia and New Zealand, which probably actually meant the Aussie dollar, not an ANZ dollar, given the way the Aussies would probably think about it. But I've actually changed my mind and decided I was wrong about that. Because I think currencies are quite good safety valves if you ever need them. Like, if we ever got foot and mouth, the Kiwi would really go down, but that would actually help the export sector of the economy recover, you know? So I sort of think I'm wrong on that one. So yeah, look, I don't think it's ever going to happen. I think we'll just happily sort of cruise along like we do, and yeah, we're never going to spend as much on defence or foreign policy, and as the Australians do. But it doesn't mean we can't and don't have a very legitimate voice and kind of do our thing, really. But yeah, I don't think we'll be singing Waltzing Matilda or something anytime soon.
No, I tend to agree on that one. What do you think about Russia's sort of expansion plans? A lot of fear in Europe, and some big headlines in recent months where you've had various generals and leaders coming out and saying Europe should prepare for war within the next sort of 20 years and that sort of thing. Is that a concern for you that Russia is going to push further into Europe and there is a probability of conflict at some point?
It's more unpredictable than other places. As I said to you, if you said to me, does China one day want to, have a more tighter relationship with Taiwan, so to speak, I'd say to you, I don't think they're going to invade Taiwan, but I think they definitely said as part of China, it's always been one country, many systems. Whereas, and I don't think they are this problem child that some people believe. Whereas Russia, a very different, much more unpredictable force. And I think it's easy to sort of say, well, it's Putin and Putin will come and go one day. But I don't think it's as simple as that. I think, be careful what you wish for, because you might replace Putin and get someone that's arguably, and hard to believe, worse.
Yeah.
I think what you see with Putin is quite clear. I think he is literally trying to put the band back together again. So at the moment, it is less about invading Poland or all these things, and it's far more about a genuine belief that Gorbachev was wrong, and that actually it should be the USSR as we know it, and Ukraine is definitely part of us, and all of those things. And he is unpredictable. So I think that's where I understand why Angela Merkel did it, which was she got rid of nuclear power, which gave Germany energy independence, but actually just put her in the place of being now reliant on Russian gas, and that was sort of a disaster. So I think, will they have war in the next 20 years? I suspect no, primarily because I think that would be the red line for the US, and what the Ukraine battle has shown us is how weak the Russian army is. I mean, really, it's kind of pathetic. They should have won. I mean, that's the conventional wisdom. That they're so much bigger, better trained, powerful, had more options. So they haven't been able to defeat Ukraine, and they certainly wouldn't be able to defeat a United States or a combined NATO if it was fighting back. But I do think that they can cause a lot of problems, and I do think if he was to be successful in Ukraine or even part of Ukraine, that would be the end of it for Putin. And he has a national psyche of people who quite like that. He's a strong leader, actually, weirdly. So it's not like what he's doing is unpopular. At home.
Yeah,
very unpopular globally, but
yeah. Interesting point you make about be careful what you wish with successes and things like that, because that's another issue I think for the States, isn't it? I mean, Donald Trump is one thing, but J.D. Vance I think is possibly an even scarier one in some ways.
I don't know. I've met Trump a couple of times and I've spoken to him a few times, and I've been a bit in that camp, notwithstanding, as I say, something surprised me, whatever, that the media have always got him wrong because of their whole argument. His supporters take him seriously, but they don't take him literally, and his detractors take him literally and they don't take him seriously. And I've been a bit in the camp of, I take him seriously, but I don't take him literally. Did more people turn up to his inauguration than Obama's? Well, I could spend 5 minutes of my life trying to count everyone up. I don't think the answer is yes, right? So, but I get it that he's trying to tell everyone how great it was. So I don't know. I just don't know with J.D. Vance. I don't really know him. I must admit, I watched the Netflix movie on him. and I found it really what a fascinating background and everything, and um, I don't know, I just don't know. Um, have to wait and see, I think, is the argument.
Is there is there a viable alternative on the other side? I mean, this is always the problem with American politics, isn't it? Basically, the two-party system. But the Democrats were in utter disarray at the last election. Can you see them putting forward a good candidate in the next one? I know we've got 3 years to go, but is there a viable contender on the other side?
Possibly. I mean, I personally don't think it's Gavin Newsom. I think California's a mess. I mean, I spent a lot of time there, and I think it's been an absolute mismanaged sort of state that's highly indebted and not working. I mean, it's just lucky it has Silicon Valley and it does so well out of it. I don't know. I think, can they find someone? I think the answer is yes. I mean, if you watch, NBC News every night, you'll see, some serious people that pop up, and you'd never say never. I also think it comes back to a little bit what you were saying earlier, I think, about Donald Trump. For all of his strengths and his weaknesses, he's kind of a force of nature. I mean, the American public actually kind of like that brashness, sort of that sort of, the apprentice kind of guy. I'm not sure myself, actually, that translates to Donald Jr. or Eric, Trump, or necessarily JD Vance. Weirdly, I think they sort of see Donald and they kind of understand. They've seen him for 40 or 50 years doing all this stuff, right? But does that mean just because your last name's Trump that, it's all fine? Yeah, with a hardcore group of people, yes. But I think for a lot of other people, not necessarily, actually. So just when you think one side's going to win and be there forever, you learn in politics that it doesn't work like that. So, a betting person would say he's going to have a pretty rough time in the midterms. Does that make him a lame duck president if he loses? Well, it makes it harder for him, but he can still do things with executive powers, and he still seems to want to push the envelope anyway. But there are, exactly who wins the next election, who the candidates are on both sides, far from known, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. That's a very good point you make, actually. I think it's very easy to fall into a trap of just a sort of assuming a successor will carry over the same support base that the predecessor had. And there's nothing to guarantee that Vance will inherit Trump's voter base at all. In fact...
and it depends on what happens too. Yeah. See, if you look at the big, beautiful bill in the US, it's certainly big. I don't know whether it's beautiful, but I think on the numbers I saw, it increases national indebtedness from 36 trillion US dollars to 40 trillion. So it's $4,000 billion of additional expenditure. So do I think the US economy might actually run quite hot for the next few years? I reckon there's every chance it might, because the pump's been primed, and add into that much lower fuel prices and things. Yeah, I mean, of course, the price of eggs and other things are going up, but actually the US economy might be quite strong for the next few years, and certainly GDP growth looks like it's quite strong at the moment. So, but the biggest problem, I think, so over the next few years, actually, economically, America might look good, but the question is, for a future, president or presidential candidate, maybe there would come a time where people will say, actually, you just can't print checks forever, and you've got to be a bit more fiscally constrained. And I don't know, 3 years is a very long time in politics. 3 weeks is a long time, but 3 years is a very long time.
Certainly is. You mentioned before that you don't agree with the tariff policy. In a nutshell, and for those of us that aren't very economically minded, what's your reasoning there? Why do you think that's bad policy?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, in simple terms, tariffs are a protectionist measure. So if I make gumboots and New Zealand makes gumboots and I'm a US maker and I make my gumboots and they don't face a tariff and the New Zealand ones go up by 20%, then you superficially you'd sit there and go, that's good. I'm the American gumboot manufacturer and I now no longer have to compete with those nasty gumboots coming out of New Zealand and happy days. But what happens is, this is the actual thing that happens, is the New Zealand manufacturer goes, right, well, I've got to get my price down. I've got to get more efficient. So they'll start using AI and robotics and all sorts of things. And eventually they become a lot more productive. And so what ends up happening is you wake up one day in US manufacturing, rather than investing in technology and driving itself to be at the cutting edge, actually takes a step back because initially it's got this form of protectionism. And the way I'd sort of describe that, to give you a sporting analogy, okay, as much as, I, like the next person, hates seeing the All Blacks lose, right? I mean, if we just said, okay, for the next 2 years, the only teams that the All Blacks can play are the Sacred Heart first 15 and the King's College first 15. Look, I'm sure they'd win every game. I'm sure there'd be some very big results. I'm sure they'd feel good about themselves. I'm sure there wouldn't be the level of injuries that we have today. Do you reckon they'd win the World Cup? Not a chance, right? So I don't like the fact that they're going to have to go over to South Africa and have RJ Snyman and these massive colossal guys pummeling them. But the reality is that's what makes them stronger, and that's like that in an economy. If you just cocoon people away superficially, initially you think it's fine, but actually long term it doesn't work. And that's why the only place you need to look is New Zealand farmers. We had the biggest protectionism in the world. We took it all off. It was a disaster for years, really tough. But out the end of it came these highly efficient New Zealand farmers who used science and technology and who drove fantastic businesses. And now they can compete against anyone in the world with not a dollar of subsidies. And that's the kind of economy you want, one that's actually running on its own steam.
Just a couple of quick ones to finish, I guess. And the first one, just picking up on what we've been talking about, it feels like it is a time at the moment where there's a bit of uncertainty, a bit of doom and gloom, both locally and globally. There's certainly uncertainty about world politics and relationships. So you're generally a glass half full kind of guy, I think it's fair to say.
Definitely. Yep.
Are you positive about the future, or have you got any concerns, or you're generally pretty upbeat about how things will travel?
Oh, I mean, look, there are always concerns, but I think if you look at what makes New Zealand tick, we're fundamentally a really good place to produce food, and we're living in a world where there's going to be increased demand for that food. And we're going to have access to those markets like India because of the work the government's been doing. And I think it's easy to dismiss that and not give them credit. But I've said to Chris Luxon, I said, years after you're no longer in office, people will look back one day and go, that was a monumental shift for our economy, access to 1.4 billion people. And I think we're part of Asia. We produce food. Tourism's a massive part of what we do, and we've got a lot of very smart people, and technology is reducing that tyranny of distance. So, yeah, are there challenges? Are there too many young people going to Australia? Have we got a bit of a brain drain? Yes, but, I heard the other day, actually, I think it might have been the PM that was telling me of someone, but I think under this golden visa, there's $3 billion worth of applications. There's a hell of a lot of money of people saying, I think New Zealand's not a bad place to invest.
That is true.
So I don't know. I kind of look at it and go, well, yeah, okay, yeah, I am definitely glass half full, and I can run the risk of being a bit Pollyannish. And I'm not arguing that there aren't challenges, but you show me a country that doesn't have. I mean, the issues that we have, they all have them. I mean, you go to Canada, they'll tell you about brain drain. You go to Australia, they'll still moan about the fact that the young people go to America. You talk about anything from attendance at school to drugs to I don't know, violence or whatever. Every country's got it. And so if you had to choose a place to live, I reckon we'd be one of them. And I think technology's been a massive transformational effect. And I think things like AI, for instance, they'll cost a lot of jobs, they'll create jobs, there's a lot of challenges out of it. But man, they will deliver this incredible productivity growth for a country like New Zealand if we embrace it properly.
So what's ahead for you personally this year? What's on your horizon for 2026?
My wife would say don't take any more work on. I think the answer is we're in a pretty good groove. It's a combination of, spending your, decent, we spend about 7 or 8 months a year in New Zealand and about 4 to 5 months overseas. A third, say 3 months in the US and 2 months in Europe. I don't think that'll change much. I don't think the level of work I do will dramatically change a whole lot. I've got more than enough things and not really looking to do too much more. But equally, hopefully it'll be a healthy and sort of kind of happy time. I don't think I try not to be overly involved in politics. I mean, I talk to Chris, I talk to our people. Obviously, I desperately want to win. I'll do anything to help them. But in the end, you have to, it's a bit like being a parent and tossing the kids the keys. At some point, you have to say, okay, drive the car and drive it safely. You have to let them get on with it. So yeah, I don't, I'll be there to help as much as I can, but I don't think I'll be overly involved. But yeah, it's going to be a fascinating year, I think, with the election, those kind of things. So, yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. As I say, I turned 65, so it's another little milestone, isn't it? I remember when I was, when I was 25, I used to think 65 was a terribly old man. But the other day I was playing golf in the US, and the guy said to me, "How old are you, sir?" And I said, 64. And he said, "Oh, you're a senior, you get a discount." And I thought, well, that's not too bad. I'm paying $100 less to play on this golf course. So I was quite happy about that.
Silver linings. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, look, thank you so much for your time, Sir John. We could have talked about a lot more for a lot longer, but I appreciate we've talked probably long enough. But thank you very much indeed for joining us, and all the best for 2026. And perhaps we could touch base with you later in the year to see how the election is tracking.
Sure. All the best. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you. Cheers. And if you've enjoyed listening to that as much as I have, please do check out the other episodes of the MTA podcast in the Fast Lane. We've talked to some really interesting Kiwis. I think it's really worth your time. We're getting some great feedback. Please do drop a like or a comment, and make sure you follow MTA's In the Fast Lane podcast for more episodes coming up. Thanks very much indeed.